folks. How are we all doing? Well, everyone's turned off their cameras again. Can we have some cameras on? That'd be good. Excellent stuff. Excellent stuff. Now I can see who I'm relating to. Okay, folks. How are we all doing? Hope you've had a good weekend. Just out of curiosity, have you been getting those videos uploaded to YouTube? You can use the emoticons or whatever they call it here, the reactions to give me a thumbs up. Um, I'm noticing very few views, to say the least. So, don't know. Okay. Anyway, everything has been posted up there. If you're having any issues trying to access them, let me know. But I've tested the links on Moodle, so they're definitely working. Right. Where do we go from here? Yes, into where we need to be. Um, and here we are again. Okay, let's get started. What I'm going to look at today is uh, types of business models. It's in the folder in on lecture 2. It's definitely called developing business models, and there's a couple of them. And again, the reason being is that as I say, it's not just about um, developing businesses for entrepreneurs. Far from it. That's only one element of this enterprise side of things. And we're just continuing because this is fundamental in getting a good understanding of developing, as I call them, business cases. And every time we need to, and I've said this quite a few times already, you need to develop a business case for uh, uh, each of whatever project that you're taking on inside and work. But again, new product, new service, an add-on feature, and next generation of and so on of products. Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra or something like that. So in any case, the fundamentals are essentially the same, and as long as you have a clear underpinning business case, not just the finances, but all the other elements that have been thought of and so on, such that you can offer a pragmatic way of delivering it, or a methodology that will be, should we say, a project management perspective on that. Okay, let's move down to get the PowerPoints up on the screens and get them out, and that's that. Good, happy days. And here we are. So, developing effective business models. And this is a couple of years old, developed by these two people. So they've just literally reinterpreted existing material that's out there, but nevertheless, it's good and it's effective. They do quite a good job of explaining the fundamentals and the key elements of this. So what we look at, again, we'll describe the business model. Now, before we even go on, as I've always said, you have the business model canvas. And this is just an overlay onto the business model canvas in terms of how you might go about using the canvas, and how as I said, the key elements around developing a business case, and the reasons why you're doing a model, and how to best approach it, essentially. So we look at the business model innovation, discuss the importance of having a clearly articulated business model, and that's the key point to it. Because remember, you're going to make a pitch to managers inside your organization, to your team, to directors or whomever. This is why we want to do this. And it has to be a very clear, cogent, understandable presentation to all the different functions: operations, finance, HR, marketing, sales and marketing, and IT. If you look at those primary functions inside, or main functions inside an organization, they all have to get their own perspective understandings of what the business case involves and how it impacts their functions. And then we discussed the concept of the value chain, and that involves all the different elements or functions inside the organization. Identify the model's two potential fatal flaws, and there are flaws in these models, and we'll get to them. And then, of course, we look at the business models, the four major components that you really need to be taking, be cognizant of or be conscious of as you're developing your business model from start to finish. There are four major components, and once you have your head around those four components, then you know you're hitting all the elements that are necessary to develop a good business case. And look at the meaning of the term, the concept blind spot, things we might overlook about our concepts sometimes. And the fundamental one is that we fall in love with our own ideas and we ignore valuable information around us, which could have a huge impact on the outcome of the concept or the process or the new feature or whatever. And then define the term core competency. Now, I particularly like this concept of core competency, and it's been a core part of my own research and studies and so on and so forth. But in organizations, companies have core competencies, things that they're particularly good at, and it's really important for organizations, particularly from an organizational learning perspective, to know what they're good at. And a great book by a lady called Carla O'Dell. She was head of the American Association for Productivity and Quality and so on. And she wrote a book, If We Only Knew What They Already Know, which was a really powerful statement. If we only knew what our employees already know, that's essentially, that's the essence of organizational learning. How do we get this information out of people's heads and so on? So we need to identify these things to develop our core competencies. Now, there are only a handful of core competencies in any organization. You'll have thousands of competencies, or hundreds at least, from someone being able to fly a light aircraft, to speaking multiple languages, to being a videographer, to being a business analyst, their main job. But they've all these other skill sets outside, and oftentimes they can have a huge bearing or can have a huge benefit to the company. And I'll explain why we come down to that, how we benefited in an organization, and explain the concept of supply chain management. That kind of falls very much into the value chain, and that's one of my other subject areas that I lecture on. And then explain the concept of fulfillment and support. So eventually how you deliver, get your products out there, and the fundamental supports of it. So the model, again, it's any kind of a diagram, a plan that makes use of to describe something, and that's all it is. And that's why the business model canvas is used, because all it is just a diagram. And I can't speak for all of you, but I know personally, as I said before, I like things in a diagram. I want to be able to see everything on one page. And the diagram, the business model diagram, does that extremely effectively, because you can scan all the different elements, and you can see how they're all connected, and you get a very clear mental picture of all the components and how their interaction, and that way it gives you information that you can ultimately query, question, investigate, and research, and so on. So a firm's business model is its plan or diagram for how it competes, uses its resources, structures its relationships, interfaces with customers, and creates value to sustain itself on the basis of the profits it generates. Very important point. On the basis of the profits it generates. Remember, the money, the profits that a company makes, that has to be used to reinvest into new ventures, further new products, further research and development, and so on. So you have all these new things that are competing for a slice of the profits. In other words, the finances, the monies that they need to develop these next generations and so on. So it's how we're effectively using all our existing resources and relationships to generate profit, to allow us to go on. And that's the key point with respect to sustainability and growth. And that's, getting customers is easy. Holding on to them and growing the customers, that's the real challenge inside in any business, whether they're new or large existing businesses or even small existing businesses. It's how they actually grow their business. In other words, getting new customers, new products, new features, and so on. So this term business model includes all of the activities that define how a firm competes in the marketplace. Okay, so all of those, and that's why we use the 9-block element in the business model canvas. So as I say, beyond our boundaries, looking at Dell's business model, and it is a great business model. There's no doubt about it. And it's been used the world over now. But they were pioneers. They were really innovative in the way they developed their business model, direct sales in PCs and all that sort of stuff. So it's important to understand that firm's business model takes it beyond its boundaries. Almost all firms partners with others, companies partner with others to make their business models work. So it's not just you as a single manufacturer, it's your suppliers, their suppliers, it's your distributors, it's the retailers, and it's ultimately the customers. So we have all of these separate entities and how we integrate these to make the whole flow more effective and efficient and get the products to the customers as quickly as possible. That in essence is supply chain management. How you pull all these external resources or partners to help you to develop your product. So in Dell's case, it needs the cooperation of its suppliers, customers, and many others to make its business model work. Okay, so in the case of Dell, if they say you're going to deliver your computer within 10 working days, that's done on the basis of how well they've structured their supplier relationships, the agreements that they have in place, the contracts that they've signed, and of course the ability of their suppliers to be able to deliver the quantities to Dell of various components when they need them. So for example, Intel might be one of might be one of Dell's big customers. So they have to be able to say to Intel, we need X number of i5 chips, X number of i7, X number of i9, for example, and these are our production schedules because these are the customers that are expecting our products. Can you now match these orders? That's how it works. Of course, I won't even get into this whole business of the vaccine supply chain and the messes that are going on in the news at the moment. But I said from the beginning, I said, watch this space. Supply chain management in vaccine production and delivery will be challenged, to say the least. And you know, it doesn't take a genius by any stretch of the imagination to know that sort of stuff was going to happen. So in other words, the companies may have overpromised to get contracts and get money on all that sort of stuff, and that can happen, but it's surprising that it happens with such a long established pharmaceutical company. So in Dell's case anyway, they have all these mechanisms in place, and you probably ask the question, well, you know, how can they get it so accurate? A lot of data. They've analyzed and they've watched performances. They've managed everything that moves inside the organization, everything supplier coming in, and that's how when you purchase something from Dell or any other manufacturer nowadays, but in the early days with Dell, they were gathering so much data that they were able to send you an email. Your product will be, or even as you've completed the purchase, your product will be delivered to you within 5 to 7 working days. They probably know they can get it closer to the 5, but they don't want to overpromise, because if you say we give it to you exactly in 5 days and you don't get it until the 6th day, you're an unhappy customer in their books. And of course you would be. Oh, I was expecting this in 5 days time, and it didn't come. Of course, that's the reaction. So they give themselves a little bit of headroom to be able to comply. And usually they deliver ahead of schedule. So it could be on the 4th day, but definitely it'll be much closer to the 5th day than the 7th day. But they already know, they have so much data, they know based on your address and this, that, everything, and their manufacturing production schedules, they can get these mechanisms in place. That's why their business model is so effective. And this is just a snapshot of what a traditional manufacturer, getting forecasts of demand and so on, and then going to retailers and this, that, and the other. And you see how Dell, in this case, have shortened their business model, basically by cutting out the resellers. Ships in the traditional model. Okay, I use my cursor here. In the traditional model, PCs, stores them in the warehouse, sends them to the retailers, puts them on the shelves, and then sells them to the consumer. So all these additional steps. So they'll literally cut out all of these things. They assemble the PCs and they ship the direct to the consumer. See this point up here? Computer is shipped direct to customer via UPS or FedEx. But here's a story for you on this one. When I was doing my MBA back in 2000 to 2002, and on the second year financial module, I was having a bit of a challenge, and I worked with a guy who was a cost management accountant years earlier. We worked about 20 years previously, and we worked together, and he went on to become the chief financial officer of Abbott Industries, a large medical devices company, a global player. And he got bored of his job and he joined Dell. But the job he took on in Dell was exactly that. His project was to set up this direct sales to customers, the mechanisms, the UPC and FedEx contracts, and find and identify the hubs to where they need to send the products, which then get distributed by these courier companies. So they set up this partnership back then, and that was in 2000 and towards the end of 2001, beginning of 2002. And the effort they were putting in back then was just phenomenal. And this guy that I worked with, was really, really clever chap altogether. But coming from an accounting, a cost and management accounting background, not pure finance. But so that was his background. Jack was his name, and he actually developed that whole system and got the contracts in place and so on, which was a phenomenal project to work on. But that was the whole point of it. Get it directly off their production line, straight out to the distribution network, which in these cases were FedEx and UPS, into their systems and out to the customers. So this was saving cost. It was reducing money. It was an initial investment by Dell, of course, into setting up the projects, how they're going to gather the data. They had already very advanced production systems, so they knew the levels they could produce and the speed at which they could produce. They already had their contracts in place with their suppliers, know how to get the product from the assembly line directly to the consumer. So having a clearly articulated business model is important because it does the following. So a clearly defined business model serves as an ongoing extension of the feasibility study. A business model continually asks the question, does this business make sense? So that's why I like business modeling. It's not like developing a business plan. Put all this effort in, bang, that's it, plan done. And what happens a week, a month, 6 months, a year later? It's out of date. It's obsolete, and more often than not, it's obsolete within a couple of months for sure. But this is a process. It's a continuous process, and that's why when we look at these 4 areas of the business model, we're continuously thinking about them, and we'll become at those shortly. But we always have to say, take a check, stand back and check with ourselves. Does this make sense? Do we continue doing what we're doing? And it can be difficult in projects, and I've seen this happen before, where we're developing products and we went so far, and having the strength to be able to say this isn't worth continuing with. We need to stop, cut our losses, and carry on. And oftentimes that's where politics in an organization comes into play, where it might be a pet project of a particular manager or director, and he would keep pushing and pushing and pushing, even though it doesn't make sense because they're worried about their reputations, and really that's what it can come down to, that kind of stupidity, as I would call it. But nevertheless, it does come down to that. But having and that's where real leadership comes in. Was there somebody asking something? Okay, assume not. So it functions and it focuses attention on how all the elements of a business fit together and can constitute a working whole. So again, taking the very holistic view of the model and then being able to drop down to the individual components, your relationship with your suppliers, your customer segmentation, your key partners, your business, your revenue models, your cost base. And so we can delve down into each one of those key areas and come back up again and say, yes, they're all making sense and are not. That's why in the business gives everyone a sense of purpose. It's, for all intents and purposes, it's like a mini mission statement within an organization for each project or new product introduction, which essentially is a project, or a new service introduction, or an add-on, next generation. These are all little projects, but in any case, it shows people how these all fit together, and it also gives them a status report. It gives them an indication as to how far we've come and how far we still have to go, or whether. Yeah. So it describes the network spirit, and it articulates the company's logic to all stakeholders, including the firm's employees. So again, having an effective model not only tells your immediate team or product team, project team, what's happening, but it also gives indicators. So for example, companies indicate that they're coming out with new generations of their products, but they've done the business analysis, they've done all the business case and modeling and so on, and then they say next generation Samsung S22 or whatever they're going to call the next one will be launched within 6 months. So they've already committed, they've done their homework. Essentially, they've put the business case together. Now it makes sense that we can deliver in 8 months' time, and we can drip feed out the information to the shareholders, to banks, to investors, and so on, and into the stock market itself, that the next generation is planned for around 8 months' time. And usually they hit those targets, and that's another measure of how committed companies are, because they've done their modeling and they're able to commit to when they're going to release products, and they deliver pretty much on time. They might come a little bit earlier depending on competition. So if Samsung say that, for example, Huawei are going to release their next generation, in 7 months' time, Samsung may pull back and release at the same time, or they might push it out and say, well, let's see how this new feature or functionality of the Huawei is operating, and we make some last-minute changes to differentiate our product, the Samsung product, from the Huawei product, for example. So generally speaking, it instills confidence in the external stakeholders. Plus also it gives employees to say, well, we know we're going to be working on these projects for the next 8 months, or give or take. And the way we've constantly developed all the previous models, we're going to be implied. It's as simple as that. But we're becoming better and better at doing what we're already doing. And that's how we're able to roll out probably faster, maybe put in all these new functions and features. Why? Because they've built up competencies. They've become good at doing what they're doing, hence your core competencies. So if we look at the diversity or variety in the business model, so there's no standard business, and there's not. Each company has its own version of a business model. When I worked with Meteor Mobile, our business models, and I still actually have examples of them, were developed on spreadsheets. And I had about 4 sheets. I had raw data of what the market size was, who the competitors were. Then I had another a sheet of all these scenarios. What if percentage of customers buy this product? What if they're split between prepaid and postpaid? What if? So I had all these, so I put in these, I'd make best guesses there. And then I had another part of the spreadsheet, another spreadsheet that pulled in those assumptions, which then calculated my return on investment and net present value. You'd probably have covered all of these in finance anyway, but it was a way of future guessing the cost of the project. And when I got a return on investment, so it actually calculated down to the number of weeks, put a little graph. So I had a little matrix of something like, I think it was 4 or 5 cells across by 5 or 6 cells down, which had a simple little graph, or a numbers, not graph, in there. And it told me the investment amount, the duration of the project, and when I broke even, and then when I started to make profit. That page, and I snapshot or took a copy of that and put it into the business model proposal, the business case. So I had all the data analyzed, and I would have gone through all of these what if scenarios multiple times. Well, maybe if only 10% of our customers took this product in the first week or in the first 2 weeks, what if only 7%, and so on. So, and then I'd look at other similar type products or services and try to analyze what was the uptake of new features or new products going out into to our customers. So we had multiple layers of these, and then I had a grafted and a break-even analysis. The stuff that you would learn inside in finance, break-even charts, invest in this, and you start spending money, then you go into negative, and then begins to curve and come back up again, and that's your a typical graph of a break-even analysis. And once you came back up over the x-axis, then you're covering your costs and you're beginning to make money after that. And so you had to break even. So that and all of the and that went up to the various vice presidents and CEOs of the directors of the company. And once a month I present these and say, these are our projects that we're looking at, the new products, new services. And they would have had these analysis done and say, okay, this will get a return in 17 weeks on this one, and that investment is very high. Is there any way we can reduce that? And I would have the answer and say, we've already looked at potential suppliers on this, and these were the best options. They're not the cheapest, however, technically we do this, and this. So having the answers, and they were able to make decisions there and then. Yes, approve that, approve that, approve that. We put that one on hold, and yeah, this one fits in. We'll also put that on hold. We never had projects rejected, and the reason being was that we already had an overarching roadmap of products and services that the company wanted to roll out, and our prerequisite for any business case was that, does the idea, the concept, or if we're sourcing external products and services, do they fit with the roadmap? And the directors and vice presidents already agreed a roadmap, so they knew that these products were, generally speaking, fitting in. On very rare occasions would we come across this gem or a diamond and say, this is something that we must have, it's not on our roadmap, we'll give it consideration. And you'd have to put an extra strong business case together and say, this is outside our roadmap, but it's worth looking. But they were rare, because most of my team, who were all product managers and project managers of various levels, their brief was, don't waste time on things that are not in the roadmap. In other words, if external companies were coming to us and say, what about this idea? What about this product? What about, we have great product here to sell whatever on your mobile network. If it didn't fit the roadmap, it didn't get in. So we had these. So we had a structure and form to it. But these business models. So over time, as I say, business models in industry are predominate. That's a really key point. Over time, the most successful business models in an industry predominate. And what I'm teaching you or lecturing to you now about business model canvas and so on, you would nearly think that we invented these things. We didn't. Lecturers did not develop these. We've looked at all of these different models, or in my case, I've used the bloody things. So I know what works and doesn't work from a practical sense. But oftentimes, universities and institutes, they see what's happening out in industry and say, we must teach that to our students. Let's find out more about it. And they go off and they look and they may talk to industries, and then eventually they'll write a book. And that book becomes a textbook. It's already out of date. The companies have moved on. Why? Because they're continuously refining the way they do what they do. That's really important. And oftentimes the lag can be as, it might be as short as maybe 8 to 12 months, but usually in around the 2-year time frame, there can be a lag. So sometimes you see the dates on my stuff and say, well, geez, Mark, you're out of date and stuff. That's not the point. The key point is that some of the more powerful, effective issues or points that are raised and in these development models are as valid today as they were 5 years, 10, 15, 30 years ago. Point in case, you all have learned about management science and so on, and the different styles of management, TQM, the HR approach, and the scientific management. Scientific management was developed back in Henry Ford's day, first production lines. It was considered to be Taylor was the actual guy that wrote about it. And Taylor's scientific management was, here we have processes in a mass manufacturing plant building Ford cars, and we bring in employees and we skill them up in these different elements and so on. It was process driven. And if you think today that someone were to say to you that, oh, that's over 100 years ago, yeah, give or take, that's irrelevant, it's irrelevant. Absolutely not. You couldn't be more misinformed or inaccurate. It's scientific management. It was about processes. What are we talking about today? Processes. What are the key areas in any business? People, process, and time, essentially. So definitely you'll always have the two processes, whether they're automatic processes, manual processes. There is a process for everything you come out of. Scientific management. All the rest are just layers and layers on top of the onion of different perspectives. So each company would say, well, in the services industry, we don't have physical products. So how can we? And you do have processes. It's even more overwhelmed with processes and so on. So the old stuff, as we call them, seminal works, are as valid today as they were 100 years ago. Only difference today is we have a lot more digital information about all of these processes. And that's why this is important. Always opportunities for business model innovation, business model improvement, because we collect data from the processes. Simple process, input, transform, and output. Always that combination, those three boxes. Always input, transform, and output. The only thing you need is a link back, feedback. And so input stuff, you carry it out, you transform it, and you have output. Is it good output or bad output? Tell me. Go back to the input. What do we need to do? Do we need to change the process? 99% of the time, it's the process is at fault. Okay. And it's the same with this. So if you think of that simple little model, and you just layer it and layer it and layer it up, that's how we complex life for ourselves, or complicate more precisely. But that's what happens, unfortunately. You strip all of that stuff away, you'll end up with essential, simple little process. And just because it's simple, people shout, no, it can't be that simple. It is. That's the real beauty about this stuff, is that you don't have to complicate things, and ye as intelligent people will know. You strip away and say, now I'm getting to the truth. I'm getting to the actual core of something here, and all the rest is just fluff. It's just designed to confuse. And oftentimes you'll see books and models written, and they look extremely complex. It's people trying to demonstrate knowledge. They're not. In my book, they're demonstrating stupidity, because real knowledge and intelligence comes where you're able to take complex stuff and simplify them. Simplify it down. That way, everyone else can understand it more efficiently and more effectively. So, my little rant over. So always so business models are continuously changing. And if you take the business model canvas, Alex Osterwalder worked in telecommunications. He just saw something that maybe we need to expand this, and maybe this could be generalizable, used in different industries, and that's all it is. And he's put it into a diagram, something simple that people understand. And that's, by the way, the difference between a master's and a PhD student. Master's students tend to want to demonstrate knowledge, which is fine. That's, it's a process and so on. And usually they'll write complex long sentences to support their knowledge and so on. PhD students, generally speaking, write shorter, simpler sentences, because at level 10, highest level of education achievement you can have, PhD students say, I want to share this. I don't want to control it. I want to share it. I have reached the top of the hill. Therefore, I want everyone else to understand what I understand, if they wish. That's a simple rule of thumb. So if we go on anyway, the value chain itself. So the value chain is a string of activities from raw materials through to manufacturing, distribution, and ultimately to the end user. So by studying a product's or service's value chain, an organization can identify ways to create additional value and assess whether it has the means to do so or not. So the value chain, if you might look up, literally just Google Porter's value chain, and you'll see a diagram which describes primary and secondary activities. And the secondary are usually on top. The primary activities are inbound logistics, and then operations, outbound logistics, and then sales and marketing. So just also in terms of functions, you really only have operations and marketing, primary activities. And then you have the secondary or support activities, HR, finance, IT, administration, corporate affairs, whatever it is. All of those kind of things are support organizations. That doesn't mean that they're any less important. They like to think they're very important. HR love to believe that they're the most important in an organization. So do finance, so do marketing, and so do operations. That's a problem. But essentially, all organizations have these primary and secondary functions. They all add value. And the best way of describing it is that if you take, for example, Audi car manufacturing, Volkswagen Audi is primarily made of aluminium. Even the chassis is aluminium. That's where they come up with the space frame technology, is that what they call it? Audi space frame technology. Which means that it's much lighter. It's obviously not as strong as steel, but the way they construct it and the crumple zones make it far more efficient and effective as a chassis for the car. And then they have the aluminium doors, panels, and so on, and then the rest of the components. That starts out, usually most of the time they buy the stuff from the US, and it starts out as a nugget of aluminium, which would be about 2 meters tall. I think it's a meter or a meter and a half wide, and maybe 50, 60, or is it more? 200 centimeters, give or take, thick. Just a big slab, like the thing you see in Space Odyssey 2001, that monolith. That's how it's, and they just run it on rollers up and down and flatten and keep flattening it all the time. And when they get to a particular thickness, I mean, these rollers that this thing goes on, they can be hundreds of meters long as they keep flattening it out. Ultimately, you end up with various thicknesses of aluminium, and they put it into a big roll. If they keep rolling it, you'll end up with the tin foil that you use for cooking in your kitchens, stuff you wrap around turkeys and so on. That's the same aluminium. But the rolls then go to Germany, and then in Germany they run through into their operations where they make the tubes for the chassis, and then they make door panels, the bonnets, the hood, the roof, and quarter panels, and so on. These are all pressed inside in the manufacturing, and then it goes into the car manufacturing process, and out the far end comes a lovely Audi RS Sport, or an A6, or an A7, or an A5, whatever it is. All along the way, all the different functions that are involved, sales and marketing are feeding back. We have potentially a market in these countries for these different variations of the car, and they'll feed that in, and so that informs the operations as to how many cars they need to make and for which country and so on, and down to shape, color, size, and modification. During the whole process, the financiers are feeding back information back to operations. This is how much it's costing you. This is how much time is spent. This is how much each of the resources are. So we're evaluating, and then they have it down to each process. So the process for stamping out the panels, for example, that takes let's just say 2 hours, that costs us X amount of money in heat, energy, and wages, and insurance, and so on. So they have, and of course, salary, employees, wages, and so on, and also depreciation on the machine. So they're feeding all that information back at each of these different processes. So they know that if they can come up with a more efficient way, maybe they can reduce the cost of the energy used for this machine. Maybe they'll come up with some new technologies that we can do this more efficiently if we use water injection rather than big power, because the big power stamps can stress the aluminium, which is can be an issue. So now we're looking at water forming, and that's become extremely popular in terms of making complex shapes from aluminium. That's why, for example, the whole bike industry has become so revolutionized, using water forming to inject into making various shaped tubes for bicycles, for example, of aluminium, keeping them light. In some cases you can have aluminium bikes that are lighter than carbon fiber. So the whole process, we're constantly looking at ways of refining and improving, and that's what this means. The value chain analysis. What can we do here? Can we be more efficient about the way we're marketing our products? Maybe we'll use social networks. We won't use the traditional TV advertising, because that's extremely expensive. So maybe we can actually look at using Facebook, Instagram, or whatever other channel you want to use, WhatsApp, I don't, any one of the above. Although I believe WhatsApp is coming under a bit of pressure at the moment. It's losing millions of its subscriber base because of something to do with its privacy policies. I don't care. So that's value chain analysis. So understanding how the business models emerge. So when we know where we need to concentrate and effectively work on the different parts. How are we doing time-wise? Right. I'm going to stop here. Okay, and we'll take a 10-minute break, and we'll come back at exactly 1 o'clock. Is that okay with you guys? Give me a thumbs up if you're happy to take a 10-minute break, coffee break. Yep.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So I'll just run something here, and I'll pause the recording. So I'm back again. You're all there. I assume you are. Right, so interesting now. Here we are. This is a diagram of the actual value chain, or a version of it. It's not definitive. You'll find far better ones on the interweb under Google if you just type in Porter's value chain. And you can see here inbound logistics, operations, outbound logistics, sales and marketing, and of course service, because as I said in the previous presentation on the 7 Ps, which I did say I'd come back to, but to find the 3 Ps, people, processes, and physical evidence. So that's the service element. And as I said, nowadays, every product has a service element to it. So even if you buy a car, you end up with warranty and service, after sales service, and so on of the car. So that's the service. And they might even provide the finance for you to buy the car through Volkswagen Bank or BMW Finance. They have their own underwriters and banks, and that's a financial service as part of the product. And that's how they sell cars. You come and pay your deposit, and over 3 years or whatever it is, 2 years, you buy the car outright, or you have a value at the end of it, a balloon payment or whatever it is. So these are the services that they offer, plus repair service or breakdown service. They add all these in, and they might even give you they might pay the motor taxation for first 12 months, or they might pay insurance and so on. So they've all, and some of them even have their own insurance companies, driver insurance companies. So these are all the service elements of a physical car or product as such. So these are the primary ones, and the support activities, firm infrastructure, essentially the employees, the building, the physical equipment, and so on and so forth. The IT system, for running production, for communicating through emails, for example, corporate emails. For the IT providing the finance systems, essentially the SAP system. would be run and monitored and controlled and supported by IT or an IT department. Oftentimes that may be outsourced to another company. In any case, you have IT plays a large function as an enabler for an organization to gather data and produce information and so on. And technology development might be the R&D department, and resource procurement, which would be human resource, HR department in a manner of respect. Sometimes you see here you have the human resource management and resource procurement. Sometimes they like to split out buying products, but that's not the case. In actual fact, this diagram is a little inaccurate insofar as that procurement, as in raw materials, inbound logistics, getting the products into your production facility here, and then sending the completed product out, outbound logistics, they all come under, those three plus this one, generally speaking down here, they all come under the one function now, which is supply chain management. That has morphed into, that used to have purchasing departments years ago, but for buying raw materials from different suppliers and so on. They're all now subsumed into this overall, and it makes sense because you need a more holistic. And in inbound logistics, it's not just the components coming in and the final products going out, but the distribution, such as transport. How do you get these products in? As rail, train, freight, air, whatever it is, or a multimodal approach, as we call it, getting the components in and similarly getting them out. So distribution, transportation systems, again, are integral into the overall supply chain management. And generally speaking, this function, certainly in a product manufacturing environment, accounts for up to 80% of the total resources of the firm. That's 80% of employees, the costs associated with employees, equipment, and materials, and so on, light, heat, electricity, blah, blah, blah. All of these, 80% of the effort is spent inside in operations, the making of the product, the transformation of the process itself. And the rest then all account for sales, marketing and sales, and after sales service. And these secondary or support functions accounting for the collective other 20%. So where does the value chain come in? So if you take, for example, technology development, and you look at these guys up here, the R&D department, and they're looking at the next generation of a particular car, and they'll go off and they'll do all their models, they'll do their 3D models, they'll probably 3D print parts of it, and then they come up with if you're manufacturing a car, they come up with a 1/3 scale model, and then they come up with a full scale model in clay, and they fine tune it and they run it through all the aero tunnels to check for improvements in performance, and they might change the lights on it and so on. They don't do that in isolation. They don't just sit down and dream up new products. They're also constantly talking with the likes of operations, for example. So can we use our existing equipment to manufacture these new lights, or manufacture these new side panels to take the new lights with, and how much would that cost us? Do we have to buy in new machines? Do we have to come in, develop new technology because we're taking it to the next level? And also, these guys will be talking externally with maybe, for example, the lighting manufacturer, whoever provides the whole lighting system. They might talk to these guys and say, we want to have these really slim lights on our car. Can you manufacture them for us? And they say, yes, we have existing processes we're using in a different industry, and we can adapt them to manufacture them. However, be careful that such a slim light might have a problem with luminosity or the strength of the light that's coming out. Therefore, to be legally compliant, you must have this, and this. So they're getting valuable information externally from the component manufacturer. And they put all this together inside, and that's how they're adding value. So they're taking out, they're not allowing mistakes to happen, and they're trying to reuse some of the stuff as much as possible. And the accountants in finance, we say up here in other parts of the should be listed there as another function, but finance are able to cost all of this. So they're producing weekly, maybe monthly, definitely monthly reports cost reports, how much it's spending. So when we do our budgets of how many products we're going to produce for the next 6 to 12 months, then they can budget and say this is the amount of finance we need at all of these different stages, and now here's the actual cost. There might be a rise in wages, there might be a rise in the heating costs, or there might be a rise in some of the raw materials, the components coming in, and that would cause the actual cost will differ from the budget or planned cost. And that's where we have to go into and ask what caused this difference. Why is there a gap? Why is our actual higher or lower than what we had planned? And we have, as a manager in operations or what in marketing, we have to investigate why these anomalies have occurred. And that in actual fact is similar to what you will be looking at later on, is this earned value chart, but we'll come back to that. In any case, they're adding value because they're giving you more information to make better decisions. That's where value chain analysis has its strength. So even within the operations process, we're looking at all the different production lines, different component manufacturers. Are there ways of improving this? Give me the data to give me a better picture of what's happening. So we pull information from the IT and the SAP systems and say we can improve efficiencies here, we can reduce the delivery times here and there and so on, and shorten our lead times to customers. So an order comes out and we can cut maybe a half an hour, maybe a day, maybe 2 hours off the overall production process. It saves money. So we're constantly looking at continuous improvement, and that's why all these initiatives in organizations such as continuous improvement, Kaizen, Six Sigma, and TQM as a philosophy, why these are all so important. Continuous improvement, how can we do things? And that's where core competencies come in, because the more you do something, the more efficient, the better you become at doing what you're already doing, and that saves money. That's value. You're adding value to a company by saving money, by saving time, and by saving effort, and reducing and becoming more and more efficient at doing what you do. That's value chain analysis. Okay. So where's my controller gone? Oh, here it is, hidden behind my coffee. I need to take him out I'm getting dry mouth. Sounds still okay, folks?
Yep.
Excellent. So moving on from the value chain analysis. So the value chain can, I've already spoke this, we look at the value chain of a producer or a service to pinpoint where the value can be made more effective, which I've just already talked about. So this type of analysis may focus on a single primary activity such as marketing and sales. Can we be more efficient? Can we get to our customers more efficiently to give them direct messaging? Or do we have to put big blanket type approach, scattergun, hopefully we get everyone with the message? Or do we need to be more focused? Because again, they have a budget, they've got to make that money work. So how they actually spend it, is it a big huge advertising campaign, or is it a sequence of campaigns, and how efficiently to spend that money? So the interface between one stage of the value chain and another, so interface between operations and outgoing logistics. So in other words, the deal that you might do with your distribution network, it might be FedEx, UPS, or any of these transportation type companies, how they can improve their efficiencies. And if you were able to guarantee volumes or give them forecasts of the volumes of products you're able to produce and the where they need to be delivered, they can put their network in place. FedEx, for example, or UPS, they can put their network in place. Or it could be Lucy Transport, or it could be Eddie Stobart transportation companies, or Hapag Lloyd, any of these global operators, for example. They can put their resources in place, strike a deal with you and a service level agreement to say, we'll take all your products and we get them to your customers in this space of time. And what's also, the transportation company will say, we can track it for you, for the customer. So you'll be able to track our performance, and the customer will get this message saying your product has now come out of production and is now in for distribution and is now in transit and is now ready for delivery to your house between 9 and 10 o'clock in the morning. These emails you get, or messages and so on, that you get on when you order something. That's all enabled through the IT function providing the systems in real time, hooked into SAP with the operations and the manufacturer, who in turn pass the information to the distributor. So you as a customer, you only see, I ordered this item 4 days ago and I'm going to receive it today between 3 and 4 o'clock, or between 4 and 6 o'clock, whatever the case may be. All that's how, and that impresses customers, and because that impresses customers buy more of it and say, yeah, they delivered when they said they deliver, and all this sort of stuff. So we're adding value. Those systems that and tracking systems that we're talking about, they're adding value all the time to the product or service. The fatal flaws that we talk about here, a complete misread of the customers, so thinking you understand what the customers are looking for, and utterly unsound economics. And they may sound simple, but we can make presumptions, or assumptions that it'll cost us X, or it'll take so much time, and so on, and we can get it completely wrong. And or if we don't investigate thoroughly, really, do we know what the customer is looking for? That's why Business Model Canvas is so powerful, and tells you, get out of the building, go and talk to your customers, find out what they really want. What's the need? What's the pain that they're hoping you can cure or solve for them? And you and if for example, you might say a customer, I'm going to produce a car for you, and they'll say, oh yeah, that's great, and so on and so forth. And you go up and you produce this 3-wheel diesel engined stupid piece of equipment. It's a car, it has 3 wheels, it moves, and so on. So my customer say, hang a second, it's only got 3 wheels. I didn't want something, I wanted something really slick, an electric engine and so on. You didn't investigate, you didn't ask the customer. I know they're crazy examples, but that's a typical type thing that can happen. Not listening to the customer. You think that's what they want, and you go up and produce it, and it's not actually what they wanted at all. Right, and then of course underestimating. So the 4 components of the business model, the core strategy itself. So what's the business mission? The product and market scope, and the basics of differentiation, or basis for differentiation. So we need to find out, fundamentally, is this product valuable to customers? Does it have a sustainable growth? How much of the market can we get with this with this product? And then we go in and we say, yes, this makes sense, and that's our mission. That's why we were building this version of the product, because we have a sound market. We know that the product in this format appeals to X amount of customers, or X number of customers. Therefore, we have a core strategy, and from there we start kicking in. What are we good at? What are our strategic assets, our core competencies? Our strategic assets might be the technology we're using for manufacturing, Waterform, for example, our IT systems are so advanced that we have so much data we can actually improve micro improvements on our production processes. In any case, we know we're good at certain things. And then of course, who are our suppliers? Do they exist? How close are they? Are they reliable? Will they be in existence? Do we need to have a number of suppliers just in case? And so on, so on. And then of course the customer interface, who's the target customer? Fulfillment and support, what you talked about, how quickly you get that. So the order time, the lead time from the time the customer presses that button buy to the time they actually receive the product. That's order fulfillment. All the rest are just straight breakdowns of that overall process. Order the components from the supplier, get the products, the components delivered into operations. Time spent in making the physical product, and then time spent delivering, getting the customer order out into our outbound logistics transportation company, and getting it to the customer's house. Those plus any of the costs associated and all this, or informing the customer of the delivery costs. For example, if you order this product, it'll cost you. Big issue with Amazon at the moment, or even any online seller at the moment. They're hiking up their delivery costs, and it's on the pretext, I'm careful about saying that, of shortage of containers, because so many containers are being held up because of pandemic and all that sort of stuff. But that's the assumption at the moment. And then okay, and then pricing structure. What way do you want what way do you need money coming back into you to keep your organization running, and you're able to pay your suppliers and pay employees and pay revenues back to government or pay taxes back to government. You need to have sufficient funds coming in, and that comes down to your pricing structure. You don't want to give something now and say, "I should pay me in 12 months' time." That's bad cash management. Or you might look for a deposit up front and pay monthly after that, or you might pay a monthly subscription fee, like a leasing agreement, so you can identify, yeah, someone is tied in for a 3-year lease to buy this car, therefore we know the money is going to be coming in. Or you're using your finance bank and say, right, Marcus bought this car, he's paying for it over 3 years, the bank pays all the money up front there, and the bank is carrying the risk of me paying back over the next 3 years, for example. Or they might say to the company, we'll give you 80% of the monthly payments back each month, and blah blah blah. Depends on what structure. There can be extremely complex pricing structures, but we don't see that. We are only interested, what's it costing me to buy that product. So the core strategy, first component of the business model, strategy define how the firm competes relative to its competitors. So in other words, can you do something, a point of differentiation, for example. I can develop this product, or I can use this new technology better than my competitors. Therefore, I can differentiate my product from and now I'm going to use that as my unique selling proposition, business model canvas. Now marketing people take that and convince customers that this is what we're doing differently from the competitors, and if they can communicate it and sell it, they can sell the products for you based on that differentiation. So the primary elements, the mission statement. Why are you in business? Why do you exist? And an organization will have a mission statement, but also a project or a product internally will have a mission statement. Why we want to delight the customer. We want to improve the customer experience. We want to develop new technologies in this area. The reason for being. That's your mission statement. And then the size and scope of your market, and the basis, as I said, for differentiation. Why? Is it on our production? Is it on our delivery? You might not have the same quality product as some of your competitors, but you can get it to your customers faster. And that can be enough. That can be a huge differentiator, because they might perceive that the high-end quality takes too long and I'm not willing to wait. And I can actually probably save some money if I go for a lesser quality product. Just by way of example. Although none of us like to admit that we're selling a lesser quality product, we wouldn't use that. We'd say ours is a better standard because of this particular feature. So we'll assume that we're telling them we're selling the same quality, but we're giving this added benefit of a feature and so on. So you have the mission statement, as I said, in your product market scale. So a statement mission describes why it exists, which I've already mentioned. And then the differentiation, I've covered that as well. It could be a product, it could be quality, it could be a cost, it could be features. Anything goes as long as you know what it is. That's important. You need to find out what you're doing differently from your competitors and exploit that difference. That's key to an effective strategy or business case, and that's what you actually sell the business case on to internally and then to your external customers. So strategic resources. A firm is not able to implement a strategy without resources, so the resources firms have. So a new venture is strategic resources may initially be limited to competence of its founders, the guy that came up with the idea, and so on. So the two most important strategic resources are a firm's core competencies and the strategic assets. And you might not actually physically own anything, but your network of suppliers and outsourced work, that could be a strategic asset. So you might go to one particular manufacturer and say, I'll buy these products from you, these components from you, but I need to have a guarantee and so on, and you sign up and I'll give you a slightly higher price maybe than other competitors or other players in the market. And as a consequence, you're setting up this strategic alliance, in a manner of speaking, and that becomes a strategic asset, because without that person your company won't succeed. So you might, and oftentimes is the case where we outsource multiple component manufacturers to different locations around the world and then bring them back for final assembly or we might do some pre-assembly in those different locations and bring them back to the home country and do final assembly. And there's a reason for that, is because we don't want any one manufacturer knowing how all our product is actually made. Otherwise, they could go off and copy it and come out with a different version and claim, and copyright patent might not be able to protect you. More often than not, it won't. So those elements that you do or already have or not can form your strategic so strategic assets are anything rare and valuable that a firm owns: the intellectual property, how the product is made, the technology used, for example, the idea itself, the process of manufacturing. You might change something in the manufacturing process that's unique to you, and that becomes your intellectual property, and you hope that your competitors don't find out how you're manufacturing. They will, but as long as you have a period of time before they catch up, that's known as a competitive advantage. Another key term inside in business. What do we do differently that gives us an advantage over our competitors? Competitive advantage. And then there's one word that goes in front of all of that: sustainable competitive advantage. So something or any combination of things that you can do that gives you an advantage over your and constantly give you an advantage. That's a sustainable competitive advantage. It might be quality, it might be the technology, it might be cost, it might be time. Any of these elements, generic elements that you can identify, that gives you an advantage over your competitor. Could be the location, could be your market, anything, as long as it gives you an advantage and you exploit that advantage. So importance of these, I can pretty much drill this one home already. This factor, as I say, is one of the investors pay close attention to when evaluating. So what's unique about the investment? Why do investors want to invest in that particular company or developing a product or service? They've a proven track record. They've been successful. Every product they've launched has sold. They've had no. That's what attracts investors, and that can be a strategic resource because they have a good track record of developing good. Samsung will be a classic case, or a case. 20, 30 years ago, in terms of mobile telephones, they didn't exist. Now look at them. They're pretty much correct me on it, have they even passed Apple in terms of sales? If they haven't, they're close to it. But definitely the combination between Huawei and Samsung Androids, they would be taking the largest part of the market. So they've always delivered, and the quality and the products, the features and so on and so forth are good, and blah 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 blah. Suffice it to say, I'm an Android person as opposed to an iPhone, but that's just personal choice. And there was too much confusion in the early days between Apple and Microsoft and so on, but most of our stuff was done Microsoft, so I stuck with it. Apple now will support Microsoft stuff and blah 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 blah. So this type of advantage is achievable when a firm has strategic resources and the ability to use them. So when you have all these, and there's no point in having a good idea if you can't develop it, and that's the whole point of that point come there. So having great technology, but technological idea, but can you actually manufacture it? How much does it cost? You might be looking at some 3D holographic type imaging process that can convert into a product and so on. Fantastic technology, but can we actually use it? Could we? How much would it cost? It might be totally cost prohibitive. Great idea, but technology to develop it is too costly at the moment, for example. That's why one of the things we say in business, there's nothing worse than a good idea that's badly timed. If you take the movie Lord of the Rings, the very first version of that in black and white was an unmitigated disaster. It was really bad and so on. And technology moved on. Now look at it. Or if you take the Star Wars and Star Trek, certainly Star Trek. There was one famous scene in one of the earlier Star Trek movies with Captain Kirk and all of this sort of stuff. And it was called the Genesis effect, where they launched this Genesis torpedo or probe, and it landed on this desert moon, and it converted it into a planet. And then it eventually kind of became unstable and blew up, and Spock came back to life and all that. Anyway, there was a scene there where the spaceship was coming around the planet, and that was the very first time they were able to do that. They were used a kind of a computer animation, but they were using Unix operating system for the very first time in film production. And I remember that was because I was studying Unix as an operating system while I was working in telecoms, and developing our Sun systems were based on Unix as opposed to MS DOS and all that sort of stuff. So we're using these Unix servers and so on, and I was just fascinated at how this new technology was working. And then the latter Star Wars movies were dependent on technology becoming more available, and obviously they developed techniques to be able to. I mean, if you take The Matrix and these 360 fast films or shutter speeds and all that, fantastic technology, and that influenced a whole range of new cinematography and so on. But until they had all of this digitized, they couldn't do this in the traditional ways with black and white movies. It to take years to try and splice each individual film clip together to try and get that kind of effect, and just wouldn't have been doable. Now with digitization, that's the kind of thing we're talking about. Having a good idea that's rightly timed, or having to wait, literally bite your lip and say, time is coming and there's one type of product that I've had a PhD proposal developed around, which up to maybe 7-8 years ago wasn't even practical. It couldn't be done, and now it's more possible. But again, I think at the moment it might still be a little bit cost prohibitive to make it more generically available for businesses as such, and it's being used in medical environments. And until that kind of cost can be, and someone can produce elements of this, then it wouldn't be practical for me to carry on the research and develop this product process idea. Partnership networks, of course. Then we're coming towards the end of it, folks. Will be delighted to know how we're doing time wise. Okay, we only have to. So partnership networks, the third component of the business model. New ventures in particular typically not to have the resources to perform key roles. And all this means is you might outsource to suppliers, you might outsource transportation, you might outsource your IT, you might outsource your finance. They become partners in your organization, to your organization, because you don't need to be spending money hiring in a whole IT department or hiring in a whole HR department in the earlier days. And most companies are outsourcing a lot of these functions anyway, because they're good at manufacturing products, they're good at developing technology, but these other elements are not their core competencies. So if they're not your core competency, outsource them, get someone else to do them, and they might be more expert in those areas, and oftentimes they are, and that's why we outsource. So that's the key point here. You don't have to be a master of all. You just need to be good at doing what you're actually doing, and get other experts and masters to do those other functions or jobs in your company. So other key, firms partner with companies to make their business models work. An entrepreneur's ability to launch a firm that achieves a competitive advantage may hinge as much on the skills of the partners as on the skills within the entrepreneur. So having the right people around you, having the right design companies, having the right prototype company that are developing your idea, can be equally as important, and they can see your vision as an entrepreneur. Or having the right team around you that are committed to developing a new feature and so on. That can be a key point to developing new products, and that's the partnership network in a nutshell. And these are just the different types of partnerships that you can have: joint ventures, network consortia, strategic alliance, and trade associations. You can read these yourselves, but they're just different titles for different partnership groups, so to speak, and then might have different legal requirements. And then we have the customer interface. So the way the firm interacts with its customers hinges on how to choose and to compete. So, do you want to compete in an existing market? Do you want to go to niche markets? Do you want to go for low cost base and so on? So how do you interact, and what kind of message are you sending to the consumer or potential consumer of your product? And that's important. So three elements, know your target, fulfillment and support, and then the pricing model. So clearly, when you buy a product yourselves, you go on, how long is it going to take to get to me, and what kind of support am I going to get from it? Do I need to take out insurance, and so on? So you have these decisions to make as a consumer, and it's how, if you're not provided, you can buy the product for 55 euros, but we don't know how much it's going to cost to transfer it to you, deliver it to you, but you're going to have to pay for that anyway. It could cost you 155 euros to have the product delivered, or it might only cost you 5 euros, but you still won't buy because you won't take that risk. Or you might see, as is happening now, buy the product for 55 euros and the delivery charge is 35 euros, and say, well, what in the name of God, that's way disproportionate. I mean, they're only transporting the product and so on. And a lot of people have deferred purchases online because of those kind of costs that are being levied at them. It will level out, maybe. We expect it will. But it's not sustainable. And that's why, for example, Amazon are investing heavily in their data centers for more analytics to be able to decide to inform customers how and why costs are such, and blah, 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 blah. So that informs the pricing model. So if you might, and some people might pay the $30 to get a $55 product, within 5 days, because we have what's known as human behavior, and how impatient people might be, and often is the case. Well, I want it now. It's like a spoiled child. I order now, I want it now, and I will pay no matter what. If you have the money, well and good, off you go, knock yourself out. But generally speaking, smart buyers or purchasers will see this is disproportionate. It's I'll wait and defer the purchase as well. And there's nothing that can't wait that I can think of. Anyway. So we're getting towards the end. The pricing structure, third element, pricing models vary depending on the firm's target market and its pricing philosophy. So again, do you pay everything up front, or do you pay, is it financed for you to make it easier to spread the cost of the product? All these different types of models exist. And it's up to you. Sometimes it might be perceived that if you're paying for it on a monthly basis over a 3-year plan, some people might be embarrassed doing that. Don't know why. If you're getting a good interest rate, it makes perfect sense. Danny DeVito, other people's money. Don't be using your own money. If interest rates are low, and which they are, use freaking bank's interest money and pay monthly and so on and so forth, because the money is cheap. And you can use what your own saving. Even if you could go out tomorrow morning and spend 120,000 on a Tesla car, why would you? You could probably invest that money and make more money than it will cost you to repay in terms of the interest to buy the Tesla over a 3-year period at whatever cost it is, 40,000 a year, and how much was that? 3,000 euros a month or something like that. It might sound like a lot, people do it. Or you might choose maybe 30,000 out of your 120,000 saving and pay a deposit and reduce the payments. It's up to yourself. The point about it is you've got to be smart with money. Don't use your own money to be paying for things all the time. Unless you won the lotto and you bucket loads of money and you can afford to do it, maybe. I don't know. Bottom line is, for most ordinary mortals on this planet, buy wisely and use what's most convenient for yourself, other people's money. So business models. It's very useful for a new venture to look at itself in a holistic manner and understand what must be the most effective business model to be successful, to construct one. So looking at taking the helicopter view, holistic view, and then being able to drill down to the absolute nuts and bolts of the 9 segments and so on, to be able to understand what's actually costing me, how this is working, what processes are in place. And everyone that does business with a firm, from its customers to its partners, does so on a voluntary basis. Okay. Unless you have an absolute monopoly, then it's not but technically it's still voluntary, because people mention, well, okay, he's the only manufacturer, I'm not going to buy it. I'll satisfy my wants and needs some other way rather than have to buy from that one particular company, maybe. So as a result, a firm must motivate its customers and its partners to play along. So in other words, incentivize communications, marketing. This is why you have to buy this version of the product and don't buy the competitors and so on. And then close attention to each of the primary elements of a firm's business model is essential for a new ventures to succeed, or for any new product development, or a new feature introduction, new product introduction, and so on. Absolutely look at the primary elements, the 4 key elements. How much they're going to cost me, how much time it's going to take, who do I need, what are the key resources, and so on. And you get this mental picture formed, and then you start to drill down into each of the components. Business model canvas, as an example, one great way of getting the detail in place, so as you can relax a little bit more and get a better understanding. And the more information we have, the less risk we take and the less anxious we become as business persons, and so on. And then we just put it all in place, and then we roll out the project, and off we go, and happy days, money comes in, you make the next product, and away you go. So that's it, folks, on the importance of developing a business case, and so on. Excuse me. I'm going to leave it there now. As I said, for your next session on Thursday, we won't have a formal lecture. I let you take that time on Thursday to work on your teams on the first assignment. I think I mentioned this to you last week. But certainly, if you have any questions or need any help or input, pop me an email, and yeah, sure, we can take it from there as such. Is this closing up properly for me? And hopefully we still have audio and everything is working perfectly well for us. So, out, and here we are. Yep. I will process this. Hopefully the sound is okay at the start of it, that I can use it. If not, I might have to re-record that half hour as such, and do my Steven Spielberg on it, and add it into it, and so on. In any case, we'll get it done sometime this evening, tonight, the usual, and put it up onto YouTube as we usually do. Do you have any questions, folks, or comments, or? No?
What time should we start the first assessment?
Say that to me. What time should?
Sorry. What time should we hand in the first assessment?
That should be all on Moodle. Okay, the dates and times. I'll double check them just to make sure I didn't get the year wrong on that. But generally speaking, all the dates and times are on Moodle, and I'll have a quick look after the after this, just to verify them. So keep an eye on Moodle, and you'll see the date. The time will always be 23:55, 5 minutes to midnight. That's my default on the day of their submission. Any other questions?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, folks, I'll let you go, and again, if you need any inputs or and so on and so forth, drop me an email. But use next Thursday session to work in your teams and to get the